welfare is not an issue, so it's not like
there is in some ways what we presented is a challenge.
You've got issues. I mean, the mere fact that you've got bread and circuses because classically the problem with living on an island is block. It's like Hawaii, isn't it Hawaii?
I think it's a great way of operating for the afternoon. I mean, maybe we can start from the outside and start to work our way in, perhaps. Jeff and Nikki put forward this provocation about the idea of the city and hinterlands. They said that all cities need hinterlands in the sense of vast, infrequently visited infrastructural sacrifice zones, super farms, flood barriers, importation, logistical hubs, ports, future industrial scale 3D printing facilities like a new factory, pastoralism. So this concept of the edge perhaps might be a way of thinking about the city to start to work their way.
I think those are right. We need every one of those, but we need to figure out where it is.
I'm just imagining
what quadrant of the city
3D canvas.
Can I just describe a kind of an ecology of the city? Because we had conversations yesterday which was about the idea of a future city as being an abstract entity, and at the beginning there wasn't kind of a specific geography, but we kind of felt around for an environment, and we kind of were discussing the idea of the city being situated on a mudflat. And essentially the city is a system generating its own soil around the edges, so thinking about the edges here, as a way of maybe creeping along a coastline or out into the sea, expanding its own volume, as it were, by the metabolism, the collective metabolism of all the ecologies that constitute the city. And I just wanted to just describe just an idea of an ecology. I understand that it's kind of an oversimplistic kind of scientific thingy, but I'll just run through it really briefly. So if on a mudflat, always raining, big white cloud above it. In the clouds, there are seeds of bacteria, they're bacterial films that can be seeded, so like frogs dropping from the sky or whatever. So there's a kind of materiality to the weather as well. And then that seeps into the substance of the city, which is kind of soil-like, so the walls actually retain water. So in some ways it's got a big vascular system that's flowing through it like a delta. And that delta goes out towards the edges of the limits of the city, and that is where expansion takes place. And the kinds of economies that could exist there are things like shellfish gatherers, that live off shellfish that are monitored there. The interesting thing about a city that would filter its own water supply would be it's actually a sewage system as well. So the water coming through, bleeding onto the edge of the city limits, is actually relatively clean. It's not totally clean. It might have chemicals in it.
Cleaner than the sea.
It's cleaner than the sea, yeah. So it's actually farmable, so there could be paddy fields, there could be algae farms that are making ice cream on the beaches, so you could actually have, mud combers that are picking up bits and pieces that actually they then can, kind of manufacture and then turn into a kind of product. And then the biotech kids could actually be startups around this bacterial film, because within the walls, the bacteria are being flooded out, and you've actually got almost like a biofilm crust at the edge that the geeks can kind of come and do their genetic experiments or environmental, so then actually people from
the biohazard favela.
The biohazard favela hackers. So then that actually feeds the economy back into the centre of the city, which essentially for me, an environment that, say, for example, would be like the interior of a nappy, where the walls are actually very wet, and on the outside,
city's like the interior of a nappy.
They feel dry to the touch, but they're actually very wet.
3 underlines.
Triple super. But actually, they're big filtration units. But they feel dry. They look dry. It looks as dry as this room here. But actually, through those walls are leaking bacteria.
Waterproof diaper paradigm. I'm digging it. That may be the key to everything.
No. I mean, finding the edges of a city is an interesting idea to me.
Well, I love the mud flat idea. I think we ought to decide on the mud flat right now. It is a frontier. Nobody's ever built a town on the mud except Venice, of course.
Right, but finding the edges of a city is so hard now because of urban creep. because of the way cities just creep out and subsume satellite towns. It's hard to find the edges of a city. It's getting harder and harder to know when you've left a city. And that is of huge cultural importance.
Okay, well, we should solve that problem right now. What's the boundary of the city? I think it's got a virtual wall, like a geolocative thing. It's like you cross a certain boundary into the city and you're like in the spatial zone.
You could actually literally see
And
it from
it's imposed by satellites.
Oh, an actual,
you can have a
actual visual
bioluminescent
cue.
edge.
An
Yeah.
actual
So
visual
the bacteria
cue.
that are filtering, coming through the ecology, actually know that's part of your
Right.
city because it runs it up and
It's like a force field almost. But you very much know you're in it and you very much know you're out of it and you're not allowed to go any farther.
Yeah, it's the emerald
You'll be
city.
pruned off by the drone lasers if you even go a certain extra distance.
But if you're 17 and 18 and you want out of that city,
Yeah.
it's a terrific thing.
I like this idea.
getting
I like
that
the idea of a
wonderful
walled
cultural signal
fortress
of-
city because
of
you're
out.
exactly right that it's something that cities don't do under globalization.
Yeah.
It's just not something that a modern city would do. But a future city might well do it.
I
because
would
it'd be
like
a
to
great,
think a future city
because it's
would.
sort of your waterproof nappy membrane. It's like all the shit's on the outside, but
Right.
you just got this impermeable filter, which some people can go in and out of, and then it's just used either
Yeah, I
around
like to
people
think a
inside.
future city would embrace the cultural break. It would embrace the idea you grew up here, you want to get out. I'm really kind of interested.
I think those are good because it's like, you know, you can like, it's good to have firm declarations of who's in and who's
Right.
out. And I think that's like a thing you can do with social networking and it just like gives it a fresh feeling. I really haven't seen many of those. There's a lot of them in medieval times, walled cities, sacred cities, you know, the Roman city. But the idea of there being a place that's like surrounded by an invisible barrier.
I'm imagining a kind of an outlying of, like, you've got this sort of like mud flats, an outlying of kind of rotting wooden walkways and low-tech manners of dealing with the mud, with sort of shacks and all sorts.
But what also about a kind of a fortress within yourself as well? So you're carrying a certain biota, which has given you a physiology that belongs to that city. So how do you actually shed your bacteria that actually help you operate within the system in order to get over those walls and still survive and not become hugely sick?
Are you suggesting that an episode of terrible flatulence whenever you step out the city boundary?
Whatever form that takes. But you're actually so it's so niche specific that actually it's a lethal act to
I
try.
like that idea. You come in through the boundary, the first thing you have to do is drink the local water.
It's a washing of the hands.
Yes.
quite
It's
literally.
alive, it's biotic. You have to like switch your flora out.
It's
And it-
shedding the colours of your city state.
That's it.
because
Okay, you're gonna have like
we'll
the
do that.
3-day diarrhea attack on the way in. But if you survive that, you're one
I
of
don't know
us.
if I want the hurdle to leaving the city to be quite that strong.
Kind of, you know, Montezuma Island.
Yeah, I've got to stay here or I'm going to have the shits for a week.
Oh, you know,
I don't know, it
I
depresses
think it's either
rebellion
like
quite
impressed on
angrily.
people coming in or like, man, it's a way to punish people for leaving.
It kind of begs the question: who's constructed the city? You know, what
Well, we're back to city-states again
Yeah.
now, aren't
But
we?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a Brasilia style thing. It's been built from the ground up with some kind of master plan.
Right.
And it's out in the middle of the mud. There's like nothing happening. So they sort of got it for a song. They sort of built it on toxic pilings. Whatever's going on the mainland, they don't care for it much. Okay? So, you know, they're probably aristocrats or kind of utopian, trending toward dictatorial. Those are the original guys who built it, but then other people have shown up since, are kind of willing to buy in and kind of support it. So it's a Hong Kong, right? It's an offshore island entrepot like a Hong Kong.
It was Bert Schneider, the film producer, produced Easy Rider. In the late 60s, him and his Hollywood buddy bought themselves an island.
Okay.
Because they thought America was tipping towards fascism and they wanted their little enclave out somewhere off Cuba. Because they were the only people on a certain country with the money to do that.
So this is like a PayPal.
So it's like a Guantanamo.
It's
In Cuba, but not of Cuba.
kind of, yeah. Because
Kind
that's
of an
where they dropped
offshore
off.
interzone. Malta,
Cuban-
Ibiza.
It's where Huey P. Newton had to swim to the Cuban mainland. As I recall, a boat out from this little island of Bert Schneider.
Hard-working guy, Huey.
Oh, he was. I mean, you know, pistol whipping your table. extreme.